In 1998, the first theatrical feature film based on the TV show The X-Files was released, and so was an accompanying soundtrack featuring several popular to semi-popular artists. This should not be confused, though, with the film score composed by Mark Snow, released separately. Today, I'm going to review and rank all 14 songs on this soundtrack from worst to best. Why? You probably know why. There's a good chance that I'm the first person to make a video review of this soundtrack on YouTube. And if I'm not, then, well, maybe I should just end it all. Oh man, I remember when I picked this up at a pawn shop a few years back. I got it for $1. And check it out. It opens up into the shape of an X. That is adorable. Now, I should make it clear right off the bat that I am primarily critiquing this soundtrack and not the artists featured on it. So don't treat this as an insult to your sacred cow. Or, do. I mean, I'd love nothing more than to get into a heated debate with someone over the song Flower Man by Tonic. Also, I have significantly less to say about some songs compared to others, either because I'm not as familiar with the artist, or the track is just that uninteresting, so don't be too shocked if I try to breeze past some of these. Alright then, let's get moving! At the bottom of my list, at number 14, is Teotihuacan by Noel Gallagher. This is a 7-minute tune which plays over the end credits of the movie. And man, I am not a fan of this one. It has a generic build, it goes nowhere at the speed of molasses, it is boring as bowling. Actually, that's not true. Bowling is fun, I just suck at it. It's a shame because it starts promisingly with the different piano and keyboard sounds, providing an intriguing foundation for a song that just isn't there. Nothing really leads the charge of the composition in an interesting way, in my opinion. And while this kind of repetitive track can work well in the end credits of a film, it doesn't make for the most engaging listening experience on its own. Alright, next up at number 13 on my list is More Than This by The Cure. Boring. And number 12 on my list is going to be... Okay, I should probably say more about the last song. Nothing against The Cure. They've got a lot of good tunes, and Boys Don't Cry is an eternal jam. But man, with a needlessly long intro, very little dynamic range, and not much to latch onto other than the lead vocal, which, while somewhat emotional in delivery, is a bit too tepid to be truly impactful, this track does next to nothing for me. It's soundtrack filler if I've ever heard it. Alright, now moving on to number 12 on my list, Invisible Sun. Oh, that classic song by The Police? What joy! This is sure to be the massive step up in quality that this soundtrack desperately needs. Wrong. You see, this is actually a collaboration between Sting and the reggae group Aswad. The original song is very unique in The Police's output, as it takes the more synth-heavy approach of the Ghost in the Machine album in a very dark, foreboding direction to great effect. It has great vocal harmonies, chilling atmospheric synth chords, simultaneously minimal yet dynamic drumming, and this version kinda ruins all that. In trying to make the song more energetic and danceable via excessive production, which sounds more busy than it does purposeful, this version ends up sounding more bubbly and mindless in my opinion. I'm not saying there's no merit to taking the song in a more upbeat direction, as it does have an ultimately positive message in spite of the dark subject matter, but I don't think this was a very effective execution of that. One of the many things that Sting has done throughout his career that makes you go, dude, can you just reel it back a bit? Like, we get it, you're cool, but you're not that cool. Number 11, Flower Man by Tonic. I find the verses to be a bit bland, and while I think the same can somewhat be said of the chorus, I think it's decently catchy. That being said though, it's not super memorable on the whole. Number 10, Deuce by the Cardigans. Oh sweet, the Cardigans! That pop group from the 90s with a unique sound and lots of personality, as well as some incredibly strong songwriting. Oh man, this is gonna be awesome! It's fine. I do like the vibe of it, and there's not a lot wrong with it, it's just not that dynamic, and it ends before it feels like it even has the chance to really take you somewhere. A little disappointing, but don't take this as a slight against the Cardigans. Number 9, Number 9, Walking After You by Foo Fighters. Oh yeah, the Foo Fighters! Everyone loves them, right? And this is right after the release of the massive and highly acclaimed Color and the Shape in '97. In fact, this is a reworking of one of the songs on that album. Oh man, this song must be fantastic, you know the drill. Yeah, this song is just fine. That may or may not be an unpopular opinion, but I truly get very little out of this track. It's just sort of vaguely pleasant the whole way through, and I find it far too static and repetitive to want to revisit it. Now, I will say that this revamped version of the song is far superior to the version on Color and the Shape, as it features some additional instrumentation, including a really cool drum part from Taylor Hawkins. The vocals are also much better in this version, and I honestly kind of feel bad for being hard on the track since Dave Grohl apparently broke down while recording his vocals, which was left in the final mix. All I can say is, props given for the very solid execution of a song that sadly doesn't quite grab me. Number 8, One by Filter. This has grown on me a bit from when I first heard it, and I think it's pretty effective as an opener. It takes a more atmospheric approach than the more popular Three Dog Night version, but that rendition has a more consistently strong vocal performance and is much catchier. Overall, I dig the soundscape on this one, but it feels very of its time. It's the most late 90s brooding soundtrack material ever, basically, but again, it's not bad. Number 7, One More Murder by Better Than Ezra. I dig the production on this song, especially a lot of the keyboard work, but some elements like the wah guitar feel a little too light. I think a heavier focus on either groove or atmosphere would have improved it on the whole. The vocals work pretty well, I just wish there was a really solid payoff at some point, but there really isn't. On the whole though, it's decent. Number 6, Black by Sarah McLachlan. This track has a way cooler sonic palette than I remember it having, and the vocals do well in driving home its atmospheric qualities. I think tracks like this, which set out to create a specific mood, work better than those on this record which feel like attempts to combine said approach within the context of a more conventional song. This of course can and has been done very effectively, but some of the tracks I've already mentioned feel more like an awkward in-between of being neither quite catchy enough or quite atmospheric enough. I can't imagine I'll ever casually throw this on unless I'm meditating while crying, but it is well executed for what it is. Number 5 on my list, Hunter by Bjork. Again, a very interesting sound palette on display here, and I like the steady ramp up in dynamics with the strings, percussion, and whatnot. Bjork does a great job making her voice carry the same dramatic weight that the instrumental does, and though I wouldn't call it the catchiest tune, that's very likely not the intention of this track. It's an effective mood piece, and it is sort of infectious in its own way. Number 4, Crystal Ship by X. Ah, yes, some energy. I dig the organ with the up-tempo drums and guitar, as it does a good job of getting you amped up. This is a cover of The Doors, but I'm glad to say this version distinguishes itself through its higher level of energy. That being said, I think the song only somewhat delivers on the promise of its enthusiasm. I'm mainly talking about the vocals, which work solely because of Exene Cervenka singing alongside John Doe. Not because she's particularly great on this, but because the two just work better together with their varied harmonies. Especially since John Doe sounds like he's ready to just face plant onto the floor of the recording booth like homie is tired. He has better things to do and is not concerned at all about sounding unenthused. I enjoyed the song well enough though, thanks to its energy, despite Doe's best efforts, and the use of the Picardy third at the end, if I'm not mistaken, was pretty cool. Number 3, 16 Horses by Soul Coughing. I like Soul Coughing, but I can't pretend that I'm a massive fan that's super familiar with all their music. Though I will say that every song of theirs that I've heard, other than Super Bon Bon, is much better than that song. I don't get the fascination with it. This song, though, I mean, I wouldn't call it amazing, but it's catchy, the groove is a lot of fun, and Mike Doughty's vocals are quite satisfying. The bass and percussion in this, as they are in a lot of their stuff, are tight and very complementary to the vocals. It maybe could have been longer, but I also appreciate that the song does not overstay its welcome. Number 2, the X-Files theme by the Dust Brothers. I mean, come on. How can you get mad at a remix like this? It's so delightfully cheesy. Tacky? Maybe. But I think the Dust Brothers understood the assignment of making the song self-aware of its inherent goofiness while remaining a danceable good time. As they so often do, they incorporate that warm yet punchy sound that is just so classically them. Side note, I recommend checking out The Else by They Might Be Giants, which they also worked on. Listen, if you think that I'm crazy for putting this so high on the list, well, you're right. But throw this on at a Halloween party and tell me it isn't going to incite some sort of reaction, because I guarantee at least a couple people will be into it. I guess now is as good a time as any to mention that there's a hidden track after this, which features X-Files creator Chris Carter explaining the series lore in a very shadowy government conspiracy kind of way. And after listening to it, I now understand just as much about the show's mythology as I did before. Nothing. Honestly, just give me an episode where Mulder and Scully either meet the fish people from Star Trek The Next Generation or find Skunk Ape, and I'm all good. Or they have to hunt down the giant claw. And you know that Scully would be all like, "Oh, I don't know what I saw, it could have been anything." And then Mulder could say, "Scully, it's literally a flying battleship." Okay, time for the reason I made this video. Number 1 is Beacon Light by Ween. Who could have guessed? Alright, bias aside, I do genuinely think this is the best song on the soundtrack by a country mile. Now, something that should be mentioned regarding the overall esoteric vibe of the album, which I've alluded to, is that the soundtrack's producer, David Was, wanted the songs to reflect the tone of the film. And this is why a lot of the material is deliberately downbeat and depressing. Ween, on the other hand, were like, "Oh, heck yeah, let's write a goofy fun song about aliens." And I think the band absolutely made the right choice in doing so. Though it would be interesting hearing them attempt to craft a darker, more sinister song for the soundtrack. Oh man, imagine if Gene and Dean were digging through old songs and decided to submit Church Fire for the X-Files soundtrack. I can see the look on David Waz's face as he's listening to it like, well, this was a mistake. Was a mistake. That's funny. Did you know that this guy was in Was Not Was, and he co-wrote and co-produced Walk the Dinosaur? Man, small world. Next time you hear that song, go up to the person nearest to you and be like, "Yeah, this song's fun and all, but I'm a bigger fan of this dude's later work, like the Dust Brothers remix of the X-Files theme." Anywho, what Ween have created here is an unflinchingly positive, jubilant song that also rocks really hard. Said positivity largely comes from a variety of factors, such as the harmonic structure, which, in the key of A major, utilizes mostly borrowed major chords and only one minor chord, the minor 2. Aaron's vocal delivery is key to the vibe as well, since he brings that signature warmth of his which he taps into in certain songs. It's kind of weird and goofy, but it's simultaneously infectious and irresistible. His vocals really sell the lyrics, which almost have a hippie-ish or even childish positivity towards the notion of aliens. I love the spirit of pining over a place where an atom splits and the Nazis are done. That's so strange and fantastical, but I'm right there with them. I mean, I thought I lived in a world where the Nazis are done. Until I saw Green Room. Also, the bit in the chorus where he says "strap on that jammy pack" is a hilariously awesome and face-melting moment for a fan like myself, to the point where a friend of mine heard that line and said, "Whoa, he said the thing!" Yep, and I still don't know what a jammy pack is supposed to be, like, at all. On top of all of this, the power of the song is just undeniable. It practically leaps out of the speakers. This is in part due to the band themselves. Claude's drumming is great, and this song features some of my favorite studio recorded lead work from Diener, as well as his personal favorite bass playing he did on any Ween song. This is also due to mega popular and prolific mix engineer Tom Lord-Alge mixing and or at least mastering. Diener has a funny story about how they initially clashed with him, as he was very egotistical and eccentric to the point of insisting on being called Dr. Spank, referring to his heavy use of compression. And yeah, you can definitely hear this in Beacon Light. They eventually bonded though, once Dean asked if he could flange out the whole mix at the end, like in Axis Bold as Love. D. Spankletron loved the idea and shared Mickey's love of Hendrix. The results are definitely audible. I mean, as far as Ween rarities go, this is definitely one of the absolute best sounding, to the point of being pretty much radio ready. Actually, Ween did in fact submit an earlier song for the soundtrack at first, The Rift, but it was rejected, so they quickly slapped together Beacon Light. And while I like The Rift, Beacon Light is definitely more ear-grabbing and accessible. Despite this, Walking After You was chosen as the single from the soundtrack over Beacon Light, to the dismay of almost everyone, including Dave Grohl. Honestly, it's a testament to where the music industry was at in the late 90s that the executives were still willing to pay for Ween to fly down to Dr. Spachter's studio in Miami and spruce up the song after recording it very quickly in Greg Frey's studio. In a way, this whole soundtrack kind of encapsulates the final years of the profit-soaked music industry that once was, with these massive soundtracks with tons of money poured into them, feeling like relics of the past. Of course, movie soundtracks still exist and can be successful, but they aren't quite the bankable productions that they were in the 90s. I mean, compare it to the soundtrack of the second X-Files movie, which was released a decade later. It's basically just the film score by Mark Snow and 2 songs by Uncle and Exhibit. Where's all the filler? Beacon Light by Ween stands as an example of the little pockets of wonder that can sometimes be unfairly obscured by inclusion on specific soundtracks or strange releases of the past. Kind of like You and Me, Less Than Zero by Glenn Danzig, though I would say that the Less Than Zero soundtrack is likely stronger overall than this one. The X-Files movie soundtrack is nothing spectacular on the whole, but at the very least it's worth what I paid for. $1. A great song is a great song at the end of the day, and no matter where you find it, any kind of music has the potential to bring people together. In fact, one artist who confirmably did just that is Ween. You see, part of the reason Ween were included on the X-Files soundtrack in the first place may have been that David Duchovny was a fan of theirs after being introduced to the song Piss Up a Rope by his then-girlfriend Tia Leone. They reportedly bonded over the song's humor and would eventually be married for nearly 20 years. Now that is just lovely, isn't it? I better remember to tell that story next time I sing that song in public. And that concludes my review and ranking of the X-Files movie soundtrack. I hope you enjoyed this video. Have a wonderful day, and strap on that jammy back. Fuel it up, 'cause I'm gone. And check it out. It opens up. I can't open it.